Hello and welcome to my tutorial for Banjo-Kazooie 80%. This will be the N64 version of Banjo-Kazooie. The Xbox version is slightly faster, but we consider it to be a completely different category because it's a completely different route. Without further ado, let's get started. So this section is going to cover what you actually need to run the game, sort of the specs you want, TVs, consoles, game cartridges, controllers, capture cards, all that. So if you're all set and you've got all your equipment, you can head on to the next part. There'll be a playlist on YouTube. If not, enjoy this section. So, what do we need to run? Well, we need an N64 first up. One of these. That'll be fine. And then, well, we need a cartridge of Banjo-Kazooie. So, this is the standard US cartridge. You might be able to read it there. USA right down the bottom with white text just there. And this is the one that we would use to run the game pretty much. Now, there are actually 4 different versions. So there's US version 1.0, there's US version 1.1, which I don't have, there's the Japanese version, and there's also the PAL version. Luckily, I have 2 copies of the PAL version. You might see that it says European on the bottom there, and on this one it's very faded, but it says Australia there. So these 2 look different, but they're actually the same version, European and Australian. And you've got the Japanese version and the US version. So why do we run on the US version? Well, basically it's faster. So US version 1.0, as we'll see, you're able to do a glitch called termite skip on that. Japanese version runs about as fast as US, but you can't do termite skip. PAL or European version, you can do termite skip, but it runs a little bit slower. You lose about 20 or 30 seconds playing on this, and on the Japanese version it depends what category, but you'll lose somewhere between 30 seconds and a minute playing on this, and you need to know Japanese as well, which could be a pain. So, US version 1.0 if you can get your hands on it, which also means that you'll need a US or Japanese console. Now, how can you tell if you've got US 1.0 or 1.1? You have a little look at the back here. So this is the back of the US cartridge, and it says 19 just there. It's kind of imprinted. It's very hard to see on this camera. So basically, if you've got just numbers there, you've got 1.0. If you've got a letter there, you've got 1.1. And that's how you can tell. Now, you might be really unsure and you want to double check. So that's when we actually put in the game and try it. So, this is how you can tell if you've got 1.0. Go to Ticker's Tower, just in Mumbo's Mountain, and get up here. So you'll be able to do this on both versions. But if you jump over here, you're going to slip off. Now, the key difference is, right now I'm playing on 1.0. So if I jump, there'll be a little delay before I slip off, and I can even jump in that time. But if you're playing 1.1, you're going to slip off immediately. So like, rather than having that little delay, Banjo will just slide completely off. That's how you're going to tell. So that's one of the only differences between 1.0 and 1.1. But another difference is in 1.1, the top of the well in Mad Monster Mansion is sealed, because otherwise you can get out of bounds in the well. So, yeah, it's pretty important. If you want to play at a very high level in this game, you get the US version 1.0 cartridge. You'll need either a Japanese or a US console to play that. If you have the PAL version or the Japanese version, my recommendation is still give it a go, give the category a go before you invest the money into getting a US version 1.0 version. That's the version differences rundown. Once again, Xbox is completely different, and that is considered a totally separate category, so I'm not going to be talking about that here. Xbox is a little bit faster though. Another thing you might want is something called an EverDrive. So that's what I'm playing on now. It's basically just a flash cart for N64. The reason we have this is because we can use something called the practice ROM. Now, Mittens coded this practice ROM. It's basically a hack of Banjo, and that's what I'm playing on right now. So what does this do? Well, it lets us practice. So We've got all these options here. You can basically warp yourself to any level and then reset it to the start. So suppose that I was like, oh, I'm going to play Banjo, do. And I got this jiggy. But then I wanted to practice it again. Then I would reset to enter on any percent, warp to Mumbo's Mountain, and the jiggy would be back. So it's just stuff like that that's all really good with the practice ROM. And there's lots of other things you can do. You have basically moon jump, you have fly from anywhere. So this tutorial is going to be made just using the practice ROM, and you don't need the practice ROM to get good at this game, but it will make it it'll make it a lot quicker to get good at this game. So that's basically what's going on with versions. I'm going to be doing the tutorial on the practice ROM, but you can't do runs on the practice ROM, obviously. And there'll be links in the description for lots of resources, including where to get that practice ROM. So one other thing that I'm going to cover is controllers. So you'll see that I'm playing on a normal N64 controller. This is fairly standard, except for missing a few screws at the back, and it's got an original joystick. Now that has got a little bit of movement in it. It's getting to about the point where I should think about repairing it. So if you've played a lot of N64, you'll know that these get really loose. Now this, by comparison to a casual controller, is probably very good, but for speedrunning, not so much. Now, there's also another alternative, which is like a GameCube style stick. So, I mean, that just is a lot snappier. The issue with a GameCube style stick is, first of all, it's a little bit too sensitive, so like you just press up and Banjo's running at full speed. Secondly, it doesn't hit the angles in between, so you can hold up and then you'll have to like go right quite a bit before Banjo will go right. So it only hits some of the angles in the middle of that range. And that's true for the original controller on this game as well, just by design of the game. But it's worse on the GameCube stick. This isn't a bad controller by any means, but if you want to play super competitively, I would really recommend getting the original stick. That being said, there are runners with very good times on GameCube sticks in this game. There's a chip that you can get for the GameCube stick that makes it better, and like there are other games where GameCube stick is really good, like DK64 World Record was once held on a GameCube stick, for example. So if you're getting started, it's not a bad idea, but you'll want to swap to original eventually. And if you can get your hands on a steel stick, I'm very jealous, but I'm not sure how that is for Banjo. I've heard it's alright though. Now, how do we actually repair sticks? So obviously this is going to wear down. There are many different ways to do it. Some people just buy new joysticks every time. That's a very good strategy. Of course, there are only a finite number of original joysticks in the world, so it might not be as sustainable as you would like, and it might get expensive. Personally, what I do, I replace these parts. So there's these three parts in the joystick. There's the bowl that the joystick sits in, and there's the two cogs that the joystick sort of rotates around in. What that actually looks like, if you've got a joystick, this is just a joystick pulled out of a controller, or an original one. So if you were to pull it apart, then you'll see inside. Inside you've got, so there's one of the cogs there, the black thing there, the other one's in there, and there's the bowl in there. So those are the three bits you really want to replace. Those are the bits that actually wear down. If you open up your old joystick, there'll be heaps of dust in that bowl if you haven't opened it recently. And you can also replace the actual stick itself. I don't like to do that, but it's an option. The other thing is, if you're replacing these parts, you want to kind of sand them down when you originally get them, because sometimes they don't go in as nicely as you'd like. And I sometimes grease the bowl as well with a bit of grease, but don't use too much, because there are these sensors in here that if you get grease into them, then you start getting ghost inputs, like it reads the grease's inputs, and it's really not good. So Banjo will just start walking around randomly. So yeah, that's basically how you want to repair a controller. There's lots of different ways to go about it. If you want, you can literally just buy new controllers every time you go to do it. So That's an option. There's lots of different ways. But right now, get a stick that's decent enough and run it. And you'll get a good time. One thing that I really want to stress though is you need to make sure that your stick is hitting full range. So when these sticks get really old, they're going to deteriorate and you're not going to be able to hit like fully up on the joystick, for example. There's a way to test this if you have the practice menu. So we can go down to inputs, turn those on. And there we are. We got some inputs. They're a little bit cut off there, but you can get the idea. So you'll see that I'm hitting 76. That's in the y-axis. So if I'm going down, it's minus 78. If I'm going up, it's 77. If I'm going left, it's like minus 72. If I'm going right, it's 75. So yeah, I'm hitting around the 70s. Now, to make Banjo move at full speed, you need to hit at least 62 in each direction. That's what you need to do. So hitting like 79, that's pretty good. Now, even if you just barely hit 62 in each direction, that might not be as good as you want. Because, like, if you do on a diagonal, you have to hit 62 overall. So, like, you know, if you square those two numbers, add them together and take the square root, that has to be over 62. Anyway, so another way you can sort of tell is we've also got, where is it? HUD info. We can turn that on. Banjo moves at a speed of 500 on flat ground. So with this little XZ dash thing, you want that to be hitting 500 on flat ground. It's very hard to find flat ground in this game, so yeah, if you can make him hit about 500, that's good. This joystick actually a little bit up from left, it doesn't hit full range. Like you can see I was hitting like less than 500 there. So even this joystick that's hitting 70, like 80 in up, still isn't perfect. Like, doesn't hit full range going a little bit up from left. But yeah. So, really important, make sure your joystick is hitting full range. Because otherwise you're going to be moving slower than you probably could be through the whole game, which is not good. Okay, a few little other things to talk about before we get stuck into the actual run. What TV you want to run on? You want to run on a CRT. So do a Google image search of what CRTs look like. They're big, old, bulky, and fat. The reason that we run on CRTs is because it's all analog, there's no input lag. If you run on a newer TV, it'll take time to process that image, so the image will come up a little bit later than what's actually going on inside the N64. Which means that suppose I'm like running along this precarious edge here, I could fall off, and I could be about to fall off, and I could be just about to save myself, but so like if I was here, the TV would show me here, but in reality I've already walked off the edge, so like if that happened then I would be screwed because I'm off the edge before I even see. Input lag's not too bad. I had about a 119 in this category with a newer TV, like a non-CRT, and that dropped to like a 115 when I got a CRT. So you're expecting about a 3 or 4 minute time save just from getting a CRT. It's really worth the investment. People are trying to get rid of CRTs all the time, and yeah, it's pretty easy to pick one up. So yeah, that's what TV you should run on. And I guess there's also the thing about capture cards. So if you need a speedrunning, you'll have to look into getting a capture card. So a capture card, the one that I have looks like this. So this is the GB USB 2. And that's the one that actually a lot of speedrunners will use. So yeah, fairly standard. Plug one end into your N64 AV cables, plug the other end into your computer, and you should be set. Get OBS Studio. That's what I'm using to record this literally right now. And then, yeah, that's what you need. And if your TV has an AV out, fantastic, you can use that. Otherwise, let's see. Otherwise, you want to get some AV splitters, so something that looks like this. So you'll plug your N64 into there, and then you'll have one of these outputs go to the TV, one of them go to the capture card. Fairly standard stuff. That's pretty much all I want to say about what hardware you actually need to run this. So a CRT, a capture card, version 1.0 US if you can, US or Japanese console. If you've got a Japanese console, you either need to like modify the console on there, you can pull out the tabs, or what I did was I put a Japanese back on my US cart. So that fits in, because there's these little prongy tabby things there. Whereas a US cartridge will have different prongy tabby things. So US and Japanese console are the exact same software on the inside, but they physically lock the cartridge out. So you need to get around that. But if you have a US console and a US cartridge, you know, you're lucky, good on you, it'll work. Also, if you're trying to get this working in a different region, like this power block here, that'll work. So this is my Australian power block in a Japanese N64, which usually runs a US cartridge. So they're actually pretty compatible, thankfully. Other consoles are not so much. So yeah, that's pretty much all about hardware. Next episode of this tutorial, I guess, we're going to talk about FFM setup, have a look at basic movement. Thanks for watching.